Chapter 5. In this spring, the weeping willow trees Mildred had planted 8 years ago were almost 12 feet tall. She had planted them in anticipation of Frida's sweet 16 party. Mildred pulled the hose from around the house and put its nose at the base of their thin trunks. Her hands were caked with rich black dirt from where she'd been hoeing and weeding the small garden in the backyard. Each year, she planted 2 rows of corn, a few string beans, some tomatoes and yellow squash, okra and cucumbers, and mustard and collard greens. Though none of them ever did too well, Mildred liked to smell the mixture of grass and spring air, and she liked the solitude of working her own soil. She had just finished cutting down the dandelions that had grown up through the grass. They left a fresh, tart smell around the yard. Mildred loved this yard. It was big enough for the kids to play hide and go seek, and in the winter she'd let the hose run in the side yard, and they ice skated there. She heard the screen door slam on Curly's front porch. "Hey, sister-in-law," yelled Curly. "What you no good?" "Nothing, girl. I'm just trying to get this garden in some kind of order. These weeds grow like ain't no tomorrow. I'm telling you. Got any coffee over there? I'm all out, and Lord knows I could use a cup. The kids is at the playground, and I got so much cleaning to do upstairs that I'm scared of what I might find once I start digging in them closets. A cup of coffee sure would be nice." "Yeah, come on over, child. I can let you have a couple of teaspoons until tomorrow, and you can have one with me. I don't have no sugar, though. You got any?" "A drop, just a drop. These kids eat it like candy, but I'm going to start hiding some just for my coffee." Out of all of Mildred's so-called friends, the only one she truly liked and trusted was Curly. The others, like Geechee and Gingy and Sally Noble, folks always said both of her names as if they were one, were good over 1 or 2 cups of coffee, but they liked to drink. And when they did, they got vulgar and loud and started talking about the first person who popped into their minds. If they got worked up real good, meaning they agreed with each other, they'd forget where they were and who they were with and say, "Yeah, and that Mildred." Then Mildred would cuss them out nicely, put them out of her house, and tell them not to bring their poor tired asses back until they knew how to act like they had some sense, which, she said, would take about another 20 years. Curly laughed as she sat down in Mildred's bright yellow kitchen. She had the kind of laugh that would automatically set you off to grinning right along with her, no matter what you had on your mind. Curly didn't have much to laugh about, though. Her big house looked much nicer on the outside than it did on the inside. It was full of dark, rickety furniture, which was why she kept the drapes drawn. And though Mildred loved her sister-in-law like a sister, she couldn't stand being in Curly's house for too long because it depressed her. "Why don't you open those drapes up, girl, and let some light in this place?" Mildred would ask her. And Curly would say, "For what? What's some light gonna do to these dingy walls, but let all the hand marks and grease show?" Mildred saw her point. "You heard from Crook?" Curly asked her. "Nah, I ain't heard from that sorry bastard since I had to beg him for $20 for shoes for Money and Bootsy for Easter. I ain't got nothing to say to him. He ain't working yet, is he?" "Nah, him and Ernestine still down there living with the mama like savages. It's a shame, girl. I ain't never knew what he saw in that old hussy. She past trifling, ain't she, girl? Ugly as all hell. Look like something the captain dragged in, and I bet you, Mia, if the child had some teeth in the mouth, don't you think she'd look just like a beaver?" She giggled, and Mildred stumped her foot on the linoleum, almost spitting a mouthful of hot coffee in Curly's face. "Well, I'll tell you, Curly, the way things is going around here, honey, I might have to pick up my kids and get the hell on out of here. I can't keep up these house notes. They kicking my behind. And the older these kids get, the more they eat and the more they want." "Who you telling, child? Mine's is almost a football team. I swear you lucky. You ain't got a house full of big-head, nappy, and hard-headed boys. They stay in and out of trouble. Money don't seem to give you none." "Not yet, at least. But you know, he got his daddy's blood. No offense." "How's Crook's health, anyway? Is he still drinking like it's going out of style?" "Child, that ain't the half of it. You should have seen him and Ernestine the other night at the shingle. They had a band. Wasn't saying nothing, but girl, they acted like pure damn fools. Him and her just sloppy, pissy drunk. And you know how loud she get. Yeah, I know how loud she get, Mildred said, lighting a cigarette. They could barely hold each other up. I acted like I didn't know him. Fletcher threw them both out. And I don't care if he married that whore. She ain't never gonna be no kin to me. And won't never step one rusty foot in my door neither. She trifling, and besides, you'll always be my sister-in-law, sis. He know he shouldn't be doing so much drinking. That man is about as stupid as he looks. Got about as much brains as a field mouse. And he gonna end up back in that sanitarium if he keep this up. Well, he ain't been back to the doctor in God knows when. But that's all right. It'll catch up to him. You mark my words. If he live to see 50, it'll be a miracle and the will of God. And I tell you, Mill, God'll see fit to it that Crook obeys his laws. Abusing himself like he do ain't nowhere in the Bible, is it? Honey, I wouldn't know. Been so damn long since I read it. Since Mildred and Crook had broken up, she hadn't exactly resigned herself to being a widow, so to speak. But the men in Point Haven not only bored her to death, but barely had a pot of their own to piss in. And if they did, helping out a woman with 5 kids was not their idea of having a good time, no matter how good she could make them feel in bed. Mildred had stopped wearing that awful platinum wig, even though she knew she looked damn good in it. Now she wore her own hair, rusty red, to suit her reddish skin tone. She let Curly trim it for her every now and then, because it grew so fast and got too bushy and thick. A lot of colored women envied her shoulder-length hair. They thought if your hair was long and thick and halfway straight and didn't roll up into tight black pearls at the nape of your neck, you were full of white blood, which made you lucky. In 1966, most colored women in Point Haven wanted desperately to have long straight hair instead of their own knotty mounds. To get it like that, they wore wigs or rubbed Dixie Peach or Royal Crown hair grease into their scalps and laid the straightening comb over the gas burner and whipped it through their hair until it sizzled. Sometimes Mildred didn't feel like being bothered, sitting in that chair for almost an hour just for the straightening part, and maybe another hour to get it bumper curled. Most of the time, she would roll it up with brush rollers and let it go with that. Mildred usually didn't care what people thought. Whenever she went to the bar, somebody's husband usually offered to buy her a drink. They always had that "I've been waiting for you" to get rid of that sorry nigga look in their eyes. But Mildred would just accept their drink offer, make small talk, usually about the condition of their wives, then turn her back to them and continue running her mouth with her female friends. Mildred didn't believe in messing around with anybody's husband, no matter what kind of financial proposition they made. The way she figured it, when and if she ever did get herself another husband, she damn sure didn't want a soul messing with hers. She truly believed in the motto that what goes around comes around. She'd seen it come true too many times. Janie Pearl got caught in the Starlight Motel under the Blue Water Bridge, laying up with Sissy Moncrief's old man. And Sissy tried to strangle Janie Pearl with her own garter belt and stockings. Shirley Walker's husband caught her in bed with his brother, put both of them in the hospital with the 38. This town was entirely too small to be sneaky and slick. Be different if this was a city like Detroit. Messing around was the surest way to get yourself killed by some jealous church-going woman, especially if she was a Baptist. Them Baptists could get the spirit all right, Mildred thought, right on your ass. And the very words they chastised their children for using would sizzle off their tongues like water hitting a hot skillet. Mildred didn't have any trouble getting the attention of most men because she was still young, a few months shy of 30, and well equipped. Her hips didn't exactly curve out now, but when she turned to the side, her behind looked like someone had drawn it on, made it a little too perfect. And it was this luscious behind that drew many a man's eye. Even though she still stuffed her bra with a pair of the girl's anklets to give her breast more cleavage, Mildred wasn't what you'd call promiscuous. She liked to look her best and had gotten tired of sitting around the house all those months getting sucked in by soap operas. It wasn't even so much romance she was looking for as it was to have some fun. Maybe roll over and feel a man's body in her bed again. These days, no one was there except maybe one or two of the kids trying to keep warm. One night, a tall, caramel-skinned man strolled through the doors of the Red Shingle. He walked right past Mildred. She could hardly swallow her drink, couldn't believe something this handsome was set foot inside the shingle without advance notice. In all the years she'd been in here, and even when she worked here, she'd never seen anybody that caused her to do a double take. This man had deep-set eyes and thick bushy eyebrows and a smile like you saw in toothpaste commercials. His hair was charcoal mixed with gray, and he was as tall as a basketball player. He had a body like a boxer, and instead of walking, he strutted like his ego was sitting on his shoulders. Mildred liked his style immediately. This man had class. She could barely speak when he walked up to her and introduced himself. His name was Sonny Tyler. She told him her name, then tucked in her lip and broke out her long-forgotten that she still had "yes, I'm alone" smile. He sat down next to her at the bar and offered to buy her a drink, but all she asked for was ginger ale. Sonny told her he was stationed at Selfridge Air Force Base in St. Clements, which was 30-odd miles from Point Haven. One of his old running buddies was playing at the Shingle tonight, and he had come to hear him since he hadn't seen him in almost a year. "Is that so?" was all Mildred could say. She was trying to sound intelligent and figuring out the best way to carry on a conversation with this man, who was causing her panties to get wet. They talked through 2 shows. "I'm divorced and got 5 kids. The oldest is 13 and the baby is 7, she told him. "You sure know how to keep yourself up," he said, smiling. Mildred was shocked that he didn't go flying to the other end of the bar, where there were quite a few women with less responsibility, but also less sex appeal. They were all tapping their stirrers on the rim of their glasses to the beat of the music and watching Mildred like hawks. Sonny asked Mildred for her phone number, which made her feel 17 again. She loved it. A few nights later, he called her. He wanted to come over to her house, wanted to meet her kids. "Not yet," she said, but she met him at a motel in Canada. She told him she didn't let just any man in her bed, didn't care how good he looked or how good he smelled. "What's that you're wearing anyway, Sonny? Lord, it smells good." "Old Spice," he'd said, caressing her in all the right places. She knew it smelled familiar because Crook had always worn it, and so did Percy. It smelled different on Sonny, tantalizing. After a few weeks of making excuses to the kids as to why she'd been staying out so late or not coming home until daylight, Mildred decided to tell them. Hell, she was a grown woman with needs just like any other female. What was wrong with her feeling a little pleasure? She made Sonny whisper when she let him in. "This is a nice house," he said softly. "Shh," she said, and guided him to her bedroom, where she hung his clothes over the door and left it cracked. She didn't want the kids to barge in unannounced and find her in bed with the man who wasn't their father. Sonny was a much better lover than either Crook or Percy had been. He was so warm and big that Mildred woke up whistling the next morning, anxious to fix him a hot breakfast. She wanted to make him as comfortable as possible because she wanted him to come back and keep coming back. It had been so long since she'd been kissed, especially the way Sonny did. She'd almost forgotten what else lips were good for, and what he had rekindled between her legs was another story altogether. Sonny put on everything except his shirt and walked out into the living room, where he heard the kids laughing at cartoons. When Frida first saw his hairy chest, her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. "Who are you?" she asked, turning up her nose at him. "I'm Sonny," he said, smiling all friendly like. "I'm a friend of your mother's." "Since when? And how come you don't have all your clothes on? You coming or going? Did you spend the night over here with my mama? In her bed?" "Yes, your mother is a very nice lady, and I like her a lot. I hope to get to know you and the other kids better, too." "I hope you ain't staying long," she said and huffed away. Mildred walked back into the living room, not having heard this, and slid her arms around his waist, like a high schooler satisfying a crush. She called the kids to introduce him, Each of them sat down on the couch, lined up like dominoes, and when Frida crossed her arms and grunted, the rest of them imitated her. They watched her for the next move, hardly even noticing Sonny. Sonny is a friend of your mama's, and he's nice. I like him, and I want y'all to treat him nice. He's in the Air Force, and he's going to be visiting us quite regularly, so y'all might as well get used to him. Why we got to get used to him? He ain't coming to see us, Frida said. You got a quarter? Asked Money, holding out his hand. Boy, stop begging. What'd I tell you about that? And Frida, you better watch the tone of your voice. You ain't grown. I'm still the mama in this house. How'd you get a name like Money? Sonny asked. Money hunched his shoulders. He didn't know. It was Frida who had started calling him that. It seemed that Money always begged, and nobody knew where he got the habit from. He was barely old enough to tell you his address, but he'd beg coins from anyone who came to the house or wherever Frida had dragged him. You got a dime? He'd ask. And if they said no, he'd say, you got a nickel? And if they still said no, he'd press the point. Well, you got any money? Frida would smack his hand and tell him he shouldn't be begging. And if Mildred ever found out he was doing it, she would beat the stew out of him. He ignored her threats. Money, money, money. Those the only words, you know, ain't it? Frida would say. After that, to embarrass him, she started calling him Money all the time. So did everybody else. It was commonplace in black neighborhoods to have a nickname. By the time a child was sucking his bottle or thumb, people were already staring at him like a specimen, asking, what you gonna call him? Then they would give the child a name that showed no consideration for his own. Baby boys got names like Lucky, Boo Boo, Sugar Pie, Pee Wee, and Homeless. Don't he look just like a little fat pumpkin? And that's what he'd be called thereafter. Little girls' names were at least softer to the ear. Peaches, Baby Sister, Candy, Bo Peep, and Cookie. There was a set of twins called Heckle and Jekyll. Money kept his hand out when he saw Mildred take the plates back in the kitchen. Here, I've got a quarter for all of you, Sonny said, reaching into his pockets. Their attitudes seemed to change then, but when Frida refused hers, the girls pulled their hands back too. Not Money. He slid his quarter into his pocket and told Sonny he could give all of the coins to him, and he'd see to it that his sisters got theirs later on when he knew they'd change their minds. The girls looked at him like he was a traitor, but it didn't bother Money. Sonny kept coming for a few months, and Mildred was glowing, always humming some song. Then he found out he was getting sent to Okinawa. He told Mildred it was a strong possibility that he might not see her for at least a year. And if he was ordered to fight in Vietnam, he might not ever see her again. Before he'd met her, he'd asked to be transferred to Texas, which is where he'd be stationed if he made it back to the States. Mildred didn't whine or cry. She just thanked Sonny for the best 4 months she'd had since her divorce, especially since he'd gotten her juices back in circulation. It wasn't like she was madly in love with him. Hell, Mildred said to herself, wasn't no use crying over spilt milk. Percy hadn't exactly given up on her, even though he'd marry a shy woman who knew a good thing when she saw one. Percy was the kind of man who would try to enter a jalopy in a stock car race and wouldn't be able to figure out why he didn't qualify. And if, by chance, they did let him in, he'd be at a total loss as to why he didn't win. The only thing he was good at figuring out was his long overdue and stored up passion for Mildred. Dreaming about her was enough for Percy. His wife suspected it, though she never said anything to him so long as he paid the bills. Percy had told Mildred time and time again that if she ever needed anything at all, to drop her pride and call him first. She decided to keep him on the back burner in case of a real emergency. After all, he was married, and she didn't want his wife knocking on her door in the middle of the night ready to blow her brains out. So Mildred left Percy just where he was, on simmer. Besides, he was too nice, she thought, and not once had Mildred ever seen him lose his temper. She wondered if he had one. Mildred applied for another job, this time at Prestolite. though they weren't hiring. Those welfare checks were barely making the house note, let alone everything else. She wanted to work, not sit around the house all day trying to drum up things to keep her busy. She was getting fidgety, and the least little thing that didn't go right got on her nerves. She was sick of standing and waiting in line for the flour and cheese and margarine and spam they gave her at the welfare office. She sat at the kitchen table and started going through a stack of envelopes that she had already shuffled and reshuffled in order of importance over the past few weeks. It didn't make a difference. Most of them were going to have to go unpaid. Bills: the coal bill, the gas bill, the light bill, the water bill, the garbage man, the insurance man, the washer and dryer bill, the house note, groceries, lunch money, special field trip money, gym suit money, school books, notebook paper, tennis shoes, Sunday shoes, the dentist, popsicles. Everything was piling up, and it was as if Mildred were caught in a snowstorm and was constantly shoveling the sidewalk. It kept snowing over where she had just shoveled. In spite of the welfare checks and the occasional day work she managed to get on the side, Mildred was getting deeper and deeper in debt. Everything kept getting more expensive, and her kids were growing entirely too fast. It cost so much to keep up a 3-bedroom house like this, and trying to raise 5 kids, she thought. Hell, 20 years is a long-ass time to be paying for anything. What will I do with all this room when the kids is grown? Which won't be long. Sitting here by myself and run from room to room? Maybe I'll have some grandbabies. But the thought of being a grandmother was unfathomable to her. She decided not to think so far ahead. Shit. Right now, what she needed was some money, a decent job, maybe even a sugar daddy, which Mildred was seriously considering about now. "Mama, can I make some cocoa?" asked Boosie, walking into the kitchen. She was starting to look like a miniature Mildred. Everybody had been telling Bootsy this, but Bootsy didn't see it. "I don't care what you make, girl," Mildred said. "Here's the mail," Bootsy said, handing it to her. Interruptions. Always interruptions. Mama this, mama that, mama, 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 mama. "Can I have this? Can I have that? Yes, no, maybe. I need this. I need that. Not now. Mama, please. Why not? Because. Because why? Because I said so. Because. Her kids were everywhere she turned and everywhere she looked. A hand, a mouth open, axing. Do something. Anything. Gimme. And always the very things she didn't have except her love, which they never once asked her for. Mildred went through the envelopes quickly, tossing aside the ones she didn't want to look at, and then she came across a letter from her oldest brother, Leon. He lived in Phoenix. What would he be writing me for? She wondered. She opened the letter and read it. She was surprised to discover that he was well informed about her financial situation, and she wondered who had filled him in. It had to be one of her sisters, most likely old fat-ass Georgia or Motormouth Lula. Mildred let the thought pass when she got to the part where he suggested she consider selling the house and moving out to Phoenix. He said there were better job opportunities out there for colored people. The weather was hot and dry all year long, which meant hardly any mosquitoes, and kids might meet some civilized children instead of those hoodlums running loose in Point Haven. And, above all else, Mildred might meet a stable and loving serviceman with a pension, and she might even consider getting her high school diploma. She folded the letter and put it back in the envelope, letting her fingers crease it over and over again. She could hear the furnace clicking on. Heat, Mildred thought. Wouldn't need no furnace in Arizona. She walked over and flicked off the switch. She had never really thought of leaving Point Haven before. All her people were here, but she wasn't afraid of taking chances. Always knew something had to happen to make things better. Was this it? She looked down at her puffy hands and saw how years of bleach and ammonia and detergent had made her skin like spider webs. Ain't nothing gonna ever change unless I make it change, she thought. And I need to change, that's for damn sure. Shit, I'm tired of playing catch up, working and scrimping and scrapping to get where? Nowhere. Not even past the starting line. She went to the sink and turned on the faucet, though there were no dirty dishes in the basin. She poured almost 2 cups of Tide in the water and let the suds ooze through her fingers. She stood in front of the window and let her hands soak until they felt like liquid silk. Then she pushed the starched curtains aside to unblock the view, her view, of Herman and Beulah Dale's ugly brown house. The grass in the side yard was growing too fast, and before spring this house would have to be painted again. The mercury was starting to fall apart too. Mildred dried her hands on the curtains and picked up the letter again. Then she found Leon's phone number in the junk drawer and picked up the telephone.